Ladies and gentlemen, you're listening to the Louis B. Free Radio Show, Brain Food from the Heartland. I am just thrilled to have Joanne McCall on. Her new book, Media Darling, shine through every interview. And Joanne and I go way back. Joanne, welcome. Thanks for coming on, doing the gig with me.
Louis, all I can hear is Louis, Louis in the background in my mind. Oh, baby, we gotta go now. Yeah.
Yeah. I know the song, believe me.
I'm sure you do.
There's a punk version of it.
Really?
Yeah, I can't remember who does it, but it's real. It's Louis. Yeah,
I'll bet.
And I love it though.
Yeah. I once went to work for a radio station that was changing format to oldies. And for 3 days, they did nothing but back to back every version of Louis Louis that was in existence at that time. Just for 3 days.
When was that?
That was a while ago. Do we have to get into age here? No, it would have been around 1990. It was a while ago.
Wow. Yeah.
Yeah. 3 days of it.
3 days. Wow.
Yeah. The whole market was like, what's going on? What's happening?
Interesting though, right? I mean, that's interesting.
It was fun.
3 days of all the versions.
I got totally sick of it. Let me tell you.
I'm sure. Probably everybody did. I don't know.
They could turn it off.
Yeah.
They could turn it off, not me. I was there.
That's the thing I never understood, Joanne. When, especially in the early days, even now, the haters are more out there. I always say they want to point the finger, but they fear the mirror. They always want to, everything's somebody else. They never take a hard look at themselves. But even in it's like, turn it off. I mean, I'd get callers in the early days that would, I've never screened a phone call ever in my radio days. Then I now spell with a Z. It's like, turn it.
It's funny.
I'm not going to use the expletive that I wanted to use on there. Then just turn it off. Why are you listening to something that you dislike so much?
Good question.
Right? So that they can be angry, possibly. Okay, let's get it to talk about. You and I go way back.
Yeah, we do. Yeah.
Like a long time ago. I mean,
yeah, late 90s, I think.
Yeah. Wow. I really don't remember how we initially connected.
I'm sure I was bugging you to book one of my guests or one of my clients.
You didn't have to.
I'm sure that's how it started.
You know, you have sent such amazing guests my way, Joanne. I'm so grateful. Some of the relationships I've been able to form with some of the people that you've sent my way, and I'm grateful. You're amazing.
Oh,
so
well, I'm grateful they were my clients. You know, I've had some wonderful people. Absolutely. So, yeah. And thank you, Louis. I mean, we can be the Mutual Admiration Society right now. Really, you've been great to work with for so long. And I'm just appreciative of that.
Well, and like I say,
it's been really fun.
I'm glad that you have continued to send guests. I'm sure there's some hosts that you were reluctant to send additional guests to. We won't get into that. Maybe another time. Yeah. Okay. Joanne,
I'm sure there must be. Yes. Yes.
For whatever reasons, no filter between my brain and my mouth. Sometimes it's a good thing. Sometimes
bring it on. Yeah, I'm good with it.
I'm told that it's my greatest asset is also my greatest liability. No filter.
Probably true of all of us.
Some people filter better. Well, they filter well. A little bit more about your background, and then I want to get up to Media Darling, your new book, which is fabulous.
Thank you. So just quickly, I came from radio broadcasting, like what you're doing, and I loved it. Being on the air was so much fun. And back in those days, the haters that you referred to, I used to get some of I think I started out in Minnesota. So I would get these people who were out ice fishing in the middle of the night, not the middle of the night, evenings. I guess I was working evening shift, and they had too much whiskey to drink, you know, so they'd call up and request their songs. That was the oldies station that I'm thinking of. But anyway, so I had a wonderful radio career and love it to this day. And when I made the transition to doing what I do now, my own business, it was mostly just because I wanted to have more control of my own destiny. I didn't want to work for someone else. I wanted to work for myself. And so then I launched this business of promoting people to do media. So I feel like when I approach the media, they're like my brothers and sisters, right? Because I come
Sure.
from that side of the
Relate.
fence. So it was an easy kind of transition for me to make. And so then it just flourished from there and learned as I went along and met some fantastic, not only clients, but media folks and going to various conferences and meeting people in businesses that were related to what I was doing, like the publishing world and all of that. So yeah, it's been great. And that brings me up to, I finally wrote the book Media Darling because I had to get it out. I mean, I think that was it more than anything. It was all in there. And I thought, I should put this out. Maybe someone would benefit. So
was there a tipping point? I'm sorry, I interrupted you. Go ahead.
No, please go ahead.
Was there a tipping point? Was there something that you were thinking about? I got to get this out there. And it's like, okay, now I'm going to sit down and do it.
Yes, it was just an inner voice that said, "Do it or shut up." You know,
Go ahead.
Just do it or shut up. And I thought, yeah, okay, I'll do it. And so then that got me to, and I met other people who were, writers and authors. And of course, I knew them anyway through my clients, but other people doing this, and that helped too. And so, yeah, I took the plunge, but it took me 2 years. So it's not like I got it done in a month. It took me 2 years.
A lot of information in the book. Go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, if you really don't need therapy, just write a book because it will all come out. Whatever you got going on will come out. Yeah. It was interesting. I had no idea that was going to happen.
It was therapeutic.
Yeah, kind of was.
Oh, that is interesting. Media darlings shine through every interview. JoanneMcCall.com, JoanneMcCall.com. Of course, we've got the links up. Let's again, when I was reading in the why read this book, and the one, Mom was right. Mom was right when she said you never get a second chance to give a first impression, but the second best time to do it is right now. And I love that. You never get a second chance to give a first impression.
Right. Someone else said that. It wasn't me. It's very brilliant, but I used it because I think it's so true. Mom was right. She was right about a lot of things, but it kind of takes a while to realize that.
Right? Yeah,
Dad too.
I agree. Yeah. You get older and you appreciate some of the lessons.
Right. And right. So sometimes people get into this thing of, well, I'm too old to do this now, or I'm not educated enough to do this, or I'm not, whatever. I mean, you can come up with any kind of reason
or excuse.
That's the word I was going to use and filtered myself, but you said it.
I have no filter. There you
go. And so the second best time is now, and why not? Time's going to pass whether you do it or not. So why not at least do it? And it's done. I think we stop ourselves from doing a lot of things and a lot of dreams just out of fear and all kinds of reasons that we manufacture.
Yeah. That we manufacture.
We do.
Going for it.
Yes. This is the therapy part that I got in the book, by the way, because it made me face to face with when I was, resisting or not wanting to. And I'd say, what is this? So anyway.
I remember when I first got into radio a long, long time ago, when it was proposed to me, when I was approached at, I'm not going to give you the long story, but how it came up. But I thought, talk show host. Haven't done that before. Why not?
Good attitude.
Well, yes, except no training, nothing. And it was like a week later.
Well, you got it, right?
The worst. Well, yeah, I learned along the way.
I did a talk show for a while, and I remember the first time the guest didn't show up. That was when I learned you need alternate material.
Yeah.
Because I was there for like an hour and I didn't have anything.
I've had that. The days first, I remember, and people started calling in.
Yeah.
There was one day not. Fortunately, I was an avid news, I read newspaper, so I was able to roll with it. And then you think, what do? No guests, no callers. You you're on live.
Right. There's nowhere to go.
No,
It's,
there's nowhere to go.
it's,
Folks, I'm out of here.
right.
When
Right.
you sat down to write the book, and again, I love that. I love that you start with essential media terminology. And I've got to say, I was delighted to learn what I didn't know. I don't know if that makes sense. It's like, oh wow, I didn't know that. I didn't know that. And I learned so much.
Must have been the TV terms, I'll bet.
It
'Cause
was,
you would know the radio ones.
yeah, yes. A lot of the TV terms, correct. Oh, you're right. So just some of the things that when I was reading it was like, it's just great about getting educated in some of the things that you wrote about the different, people. And I was aware of B-roll and some of those terminology, but not the other, and not the actual words for the I would call them a crawler or a ticker.
Mhm.
And the oh God, I'm sorry, I don't know that I have it circled in here. I don't know if you can see how many pages I have turned down in the
Oh,
book.
look at that.
Oh yeah, yeah.
You're such a good friend.
I was going on and on. It's like, oh, this and this and this. I like when you also said recently invited to speak on the topic of book publicity at a virtual clubhouse room. I hope you don't mind I'm reading some of your book to you,
That's
Joanne
fine.
McCall.
Oh,
Now in the session, the host was suddenly dropped from the room. Who knows why? These things happen.
they do. Yes, they do. You want to get into surprise stories? I'll bet you have a few.
Oh, well, I do, but this is more about you. I will tell you, just last week, I had a credible cartoonist on that's been around forever. He worked with Harvey Pekar, the movie about Harvey Pekar, the illustrator, and his name is Gary Dumb, and he had throat cancer, so he has to put his thumb in the hole in his throat to speak. Well, and I had the co-author of the recent comic that they did on, and Gary, his audio went out live. We were live, not before. Before it was fine, and in the interview a little bit, his audio went out on his end, and he was trying to figure it out, etc. What was beautiful about it is he would hold up signs. Like he would write something and hold it up, which was great. It ended up working out. I didn't want to stop in the middle or put him off because I had the co-author on. But it was great. I've got a couple of pictures I should send you.
Oh, that's wonderful.
It was great. He's holding up a sign, and because he's such a great illustrator. I mean, they were nice and bold and very easy to read.
I'll bet.
So it was,
Yeah.
not like my writing.
Or mine. Yeah.
Yeah. So
Right.
those things happen. You have to roll.
Well, they do. And I think also surprises will show you how far you've come. When you get to the point where you almost, I mean, not quite, but you almost look forward to those surprises to see how well you can handle it. That's a really good thing. That's a really, really good thing.
You learn from it.
You do. We were doing a tree lighting ceremony. This was the day after Thanksgiving some years ago. I was in radio then in broadcasting, and it was in the local town square. They had one of those huge trees, and it was the tree lighting ceremony, and they did all this activity around it. At the time I was on stage with one of my coworkers, it was not only live on the radio, but it was on television too. And there were all these fictional characters dancing around, like Cinnamon Bear and Father Time and Santa Claus. They're big and they're dancing around. And meanwhile, we're talking about the activities of what's coming up. And my coworker he's talking, blah, 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 blah. And then he suddenly puts his mic down and he turns and he looks at me and he says, "Joe, I just completely forgot what I was going to say." It's all
These
live.
days that happens with me a lot.
Well, but thank God I was listening. I was listening to what he was saying. I could have easily been thinking about what we would do next or what was coming up after, this dance or, but I was actually listening and was able to pick up my mic and continue on. Now that was a surprise.
Yeah.
But the lesson there is, listen, pay attention to what's going on. Yeah.
I found again, very early if you don't mind, another one of my quick
Please.
stories. Very early, and I think when I got into radio, I didn't realize initially there were publicists or that there were book companies that would send you a book and content. There was an author, I can't recall who it was, and I had him on, and I had already had the book, somehow found him, and I remember him saying, Joanne McCall, he said, you really read my book.
Mm.
And I said, yeah. I just kind of blew past it. I said, yes, I did. And he said it again. And I'm thinking, what he said that he had never been interviewed by someone that he could tell read the book thoroughly. And I'm thinking, what
No, you're the exception. You're an exception.
seriously?
There's a few.
Yeah,
That's an
I
exception.
would think, for me, how do you do an interview if you haven't at least sat with a book and, maybe you're not reading it. And in fairness, when I get a novelist on, I don't always read the book. I read in the book. I read things in the book. I want to know the characters, etc. I don't. Yet I didn't get that at the time. And then I understood that others are provided with something. I heard someone, won't mention the host, say, what's your book about? And I'm thinking, oh, I cringed.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, what's your book about? I don't know, Joanne.
Yeah.
I don't want to make this sound egocentric or elitist.
Oh, no. No. I mean, there's something called,
somebody.
well, that's called an informed interview. If you're a host and you actually read the book or you do some research and you're ready for an interview, it's called an informed interview. And I think authors and others, experts, I think they enjoy that because, there's the quality of the questions are better and that sort of thing. Then there's the uninformed interview. That's someone who maybe pulls the question sheet from the press kit or, prints it out or just reads it on their screen. I mean, there's lots of different ways now, right? They just look at the questions and ask them. There's some goodness in that too for the author because they know how the interview is going to go and they know what their answers are going to be. And maybe they'll elaborate here and there, but there won't be any surprises, at least in terms of content. With an informed interview, you might be asked a question from page, 72, and it's about some study and it's something the author's going, oh, what did I write on page 72?
Yeah.
So there's pros and cons.
I wouldn't put someone that I would not want to put someone in that position to get too detailed about something that the other thing about the radio tours, and I learned early on that they get asked the same 5 or 10 questions over and over and over again. And although there's no surprises, I've talked to some authors that I've reached out to after those because they're generally on a radio tour very brief. For me, 10, 15, 20 minutes or whatever. I don't do 10 minutes. I just don't think it's beneficial for anyone. Yet, again, I'm not criticizing it. Others are great at it, I'm sure. It's not for me, but they just, and then I talk to them afterwards and they'll say, when I get them back, it's like, I don't want to sound boastful. They appreciated the questions, and it wasn't then they'll say, oh, you get the same questions over for hours because they're doing them pretty much back to back. There's a few minutes in between. That's got to be challenging for them. Say, oh, here comes another one. The same question. And I get it. They're promoting their book at different stations, different areas.
Yeah. When I have clients who do like a satellite tour, whether it's a satellite radio tour, satellite television tour, it can be different now with the Zoom and other platforms. But when they're doing back-to-back interviews, what I suggest that they do is they take their key messages and maybe write one on, this is actually physical, not for TV, but for radio, where you put your key messages on each card, just a sentence or so. Once you tell that story or make that point, you flip it over. Because when you're doing interview after interview after interview, you start to forget, did I talk about that here? Have I mentioned, I'm not sure, I can't remember. So this is a way to kind of track it.
And you're right about that. in your book, Media Darling,
Oh,
about
did I? Yeah.
yeah.
So I don't remember.
See,
What's in there? I don't know.
And by the way, I love the acronym for Media Darling: motivated, energized, directed, etc. And you really, I'm very sincere about this, Joanne McCall. It's so informative, and I understand it's for someone being interviewed, not you already have what the next book's going to be. Should do one for interviewers.
Yes.
Maybe.
I think I mentioned that for hosts. Yeah.
Yeah, for hosts. Yeah.
Yeah.
But you talked about the end of your next book, so we'll get to that a little bit. You talked about the inner game. Again, I could go on and on. Some believe the inner game is only about creating goals and mapping out how to attain them. Yet, it's much more than that. The inner game.
Yeah, it's all the things that you say to yourself. We touched on this a little while ago, but the outer game is everything that goes on out there. It's booking the interview, it's coming up with the ideas, it's pitching the producer, the host, and then it's delivering an interview. It's everything out there. But long before that, you start thinking about, maybe I should do, a radio campaign of some sort, or, a blog campaign, whatever it is that you want to do. And then you may have the things that come up that say, oh gosh, I don't have enough education to do that. I'm not a PhD, or I'm too old to be doing that. I don't know technology. I'm a technophobe. I can't do that. Or, there's just, as we mentioned, there's all kinds of excuses, right?
Yeah.
Reasons that stop us.
Yeah.
We don't even know. We don't really even know. We're saying we want to do something and we're not taking action towards it. That's really an indicator. If you say you want something and you're not really moving towards it, there's something in the way. It could be timing. It could be, you have a work thing coming up or something's happening, but likely if you're procrastinating, there's something in the way, some sort of belief in the way. So the inner game is about taking a look at that. You want to remove those things so that you don't have resistance to getting the things that you want. You have to jump in and try it. If you've never done an interview, you can do mock interviews. You can set them up yourself. You can have a friend ask you, come up with a list of questions, 10 questions, have someone ask you the questions, you get on camera and answer them and see how you do. It's a great way to start.
Great way to start.
Yeah.
I like also in your book, and that book is Media Darling Shine Through Every Interview. You can go to joannemccall.com. You can go to Amazon, and we've got those links up. Media Darling is not, and then you say, annoyed when the host has not read their book. I can't be annoyed. I understand someone or being happy that someone did read the book, but you can't be in an interview and be annoyed.
No.
Yeah.
It's a bad idea.
I love that. Again, love the book. When you talk about some of the things about being a media darling and telling them, because it starts to, once you get it, once people read the book and get it, it will really move them ahead. I was going to say snowball, but maybe that's not the right. I'm just not. Cognition isn't the best today, but that it really it'll start rolling for them.
Yes, and really, it can be for a CEO who wants to get out there, literally, or it can be for just your average person who wants to have a bigger presence on LinkedIn or on whatever, Instagram. It's if you want to be delivering your message more, whatever it is, then these kinds of tips and advice will really help you. I think I start the book with a story of I was scrolling through my Instagram feed, and there was one of my contacts was doing a live. And so I stopped, and up came the volume, and I watched what was going on. I wanted to see this interview. And the host was saying, my contact was saying, I can't believe that she isn't here yet. She hasn't shown up for this interview.
Yeah.
We set a specific time for us to do this interview, and she's not even here. I just can't believe that. And I'm fascinated, first of all. I'm just fascinated. And then my publicist brain kicks in and says, why is she doing this? Because this is all recorded. Your guest is going to see it later.
Yeah.
So the guest arrives and everybody's all happy. Oh, good. I'm so glad you're here. They start, they do their interview. And meanwhile, I'm thinking, okay, well, they're going to see that later. So those are the kinds of things. So what's the lesson there? First of all, don't criticize your guest.
Certainly.
or the host, if you happen to be. And also show up with other material. We touched on this a little while ago, doing talk shows, having other material to talk about. So if you're waiting for someone to show up at an interview and they're late, which you should never be late, by the way, have something else to delve into. Maybe it's about the topic itself or your own perspective, that kind of thing.
But
So-
not that's you start the book with that, Joanne McCall, and it was bizarre that they would do that, knowing it's one thing if you're off mic or off camera or whatever, saying, I can't believe, and I get that. It's like, oh my God, it's, they were supposed to be here at the studio at 11, it's 11:15 and you don't know what's going on. You don't know what's happening with people. So to criticize, to jump to a conclusion that they're just don't care that they get there on time is wrong, especially on air. Like I say, I can see someone being frustrated, a host being frustrated, or a producer being frustrated that the guest isn't there. But wow, to do it on air.
Yeah. Well,
I was surprised by that also.
Well, you're a pro. I mean, you're a pro. You've been doing this a long time.
I've been doing this a long
but someone
time.
who doesn't know, doesn't know.
Yeah. And well, but you'd think they would. It shouldn't take a lot of thought to think I'm live or I'm recorded, and it reflects badly on the host. For
a lot is done in the name of authenticity.
That's what you wrote. Yeah, that's right. Darling.
Yeah.
That's
sometimes it's just rude.
For listeners, you did air quotes with authenticity. There's authenticity, and then there's a rationale for what they said afterwards. Well, I was trying to be authentic, or I was being authentic. It's like, really?
For ranting.
Yeah. You were being a jerk. Yeah, rude.
A jerk.
Yeah. No, better, rude. You were being really, really, really rude. And that would not be someone that I would want to listen to. You write, your host might be a jerk later in the book. So, and I love that you talk about verbal aikido.
Right. Verbal aikido. That's when something's coming at you and you deflect it. I think in all of life, it's a good thing to learn that rather than fighting with it. Because if you have a host who is argumentative, confrontational, which happens, now hopefully you know it going in. So if you've set up an interview with someone who that's their whole shtick is to be argumentative and confrontive, then you should know and be ready. And some people love that, by the way. Some guests, some hosts, they love that. Great. Have at it. It's not my thing, but they like it. Sometimes you get surprised and you are doing an interview and suddenly, something gets triggered and a host gets confrontational. So learning how to kind of deal with that kind of thing is important. And I think the main thing to keep in mind is that even though the host might be being a jerk, you're speaking to the listener. Or the viewer, but the listener. So you want to speak through the host to the listener who's still listening, and how you handle that says a lot to them. So, I
mean, we could talk more about why a host would be that way. That might be their style, and the listeners love that. And I certainly understand being inquisitive, and I've certainly been that way. It's like, well, we're but to be confrontational,
right?
For me, why did you invite this person on just to show because I've got control of the mic and I got the control. So one time I had one in studio guest. Well, there was a few people in whose microphone I had to turn off. Yeah. Well, one time in over 2 decades of doing it, because he wouldn't. And I felt badly about it. And I kept saying, I don't want to say his name. There were other people that would, as soon as one of them would start to talk, he would jump in and roll over him. And I was the host, so I had to take control of it. I didn't want to arguing him. And I finally said, sorry, I had to turn your mic off. Yeah, I leaned away from the mic. I had to turn your mic off got to let him. And I thought he'd storm out, and he didn't.
Oh, wow.
So
That's
I
interesting.
had to do it twice Joanne, in that interview.
Wow. Wow. I
And
think,
I'm friends with him, friendly with him today. We're
oh,
certainly,
that's good.
it wasn't like he, that, yeah.
So he was able to handle it. So that's good. That's good.
Yeah.
I think if you have an interview
Didn't
and there's
learn from it the first time. Sorry.
if you're doing an interview and you have a host, there's a difference between a little pushback and being confrontational.
Yeah.
So a little pushback, I think, is
Oh,
normal.
yeah.
If you're saying this is how things are, then a little pushback saying, well, are you sure it's that way? That's not really what we're talking about. That's a good interview.
No. Yeah,
Yeah,
well,
that's a good interview.
it was pure radio at the time, and I had to be. You know what it's
Well,
like.
you had to, yes.
I
Yes.
had to.
Yes,
you
you
know what
did.
it's like listening to something where you have two people talking at the same time. You get nothing. It's not like you can tune one out. I certainly can't. It's like I get nothing from that. I can't, because they're both talking at the same time. So
That's great you did that. It's great you did that.
And believe me, I did not want to do that.
Of course.
I didn't want to do that. You have to. And I love your chapter 8 surprise. That did not just happen. It was great, because you tell people, what if something happens like we're just talking about? What if I completely forget what I'm saying right in the middle of a thought? That's me these days. And it was, what if they ask me something untrue or wrong? And when you talk about the verbal aikido, was just fantastic. I love the term, knowing what aikido is, and you explain it using an opponent's
energy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which is great. Do you do aikido?
No.
Okay.
I can appreciate it though.
Yeah.
I did taekwondo for a while.
Yeah?
Yeah.
How long ago? While back?
A while back.
Oh,
maybe 20 years. That's a while back.
Yeah. Well, yeah, that's wonderful. I want to say hi to Jack at the shop around the corner.
Hi, Jack.
Yeah. He's a great guy, Joanne. And it was one station I was at, and I would always tell them, I'm going to the shop. That's not the name of a store. It's Mahoning Snacks. But it was around the corner from the studio. And I'd say, I'm going to the shop around the corner to get my newspapers. Yeah, I'd be there early, and I wanted to pick up some physical newspapers. And was the shop around the corner. Plus, I love the old movie at the shop around the corner also, the old classic movie. I'm talking about Joanne McCall, her book, Media Darling, Shine Through Every Interview. Let's talk a little bit more. You're good time-wise, correct?
Sure, you bet.
TV, which I have no experience with. Tell us about the TV interview, because it's certainly different than a pure radio interview.
Definitely have that whole visual component. But, things are changing with technology too, Louis. As you know, a lot of radio shows are done on video. Podcasts have a video component, and it's just so it applies almost everywhere. But you have the visual component. So lighting, I didn't really get into all those details, because you can Google, or, you can look up how to set up your lighting and that sort of thing. So I didn't really go into that. But how you deliver is more what I stressed. And also, I think media training is a great thing to learn about any strange tics you might have. And I've got lots of examples from over the years of things that have happened. For example, let's see, I had a PhD, this highly credible expert. We were in New York. He was doing a TV show. They had co-hosts, and then my client, and there were 3 swiveling bar stools up on the stage area, the set. And the co-hosts were in their swiveling. I remember walking in thinking, who thought that was a good idea? And they were used to it. So they just sat very still. But my client, yes, the hosts were great. But my client got in the chair, and here he is, this respectable PhD. He's so smart. He was there discussing an important issue, and he was swiveling back and forth the entire time through that interview. So it's difficult to look credible when you're swiveling back and forth. So it's just an example of the kinds of things that you might do when you're nervous that you are unconscious about. You're not conscious of it. He didn't know he was doing that. He had no idea until after when he saw the clip. And so and I'm not saying you have to do training with a trainer, although it's a great idea. You can do mock interviews, as we touched on earlier, where you practice yourself and have someone ask you some tough questions. Things that would, maybe you're a little nervous about talking about. You may or may not have it. Maybe you're nervous enough just being on camera initially. So just see what you do. How do you behave? Are you doing any weird things, touching your hair, fiddling around, tapping your foot? And you want to watch for those things. And once they become conscious, you can begin to let that go and just relax. You relax and you have some fun.
Yeah.
Right.
Relax and have, yeah. When I've seen, there was Steve Laffey did a movie years ago called Fixing America. And he recently announced he's running for president. And when I see the clip, when I saw myself in the movie, and it was me doing the radio show, and I generally like to stand. I don't sit well. I don't sit as well. And I was bouncing around. It was just funny to see. I didn't realize that's what
that you did that
doing. Yeah, it was. And again, I wasn't being interviewed. I was interviewing him in the studio, and he had a camera crew that was filming it. But it was just interesting to me. They're bouncing all around, standing up and going back and forth.
It can be very surprising.
Until you see it. Yeah, surprising. You don't know unless you, like you say, do a mock interview, check it out, have someone observe you.
I had someone I was working with once, and we were doing exactly that. We had a video, I had a videographer there filming the whole thing, and I was asking her questions. She was the only one on camera, so I was off camera, but I was asking her the questions. And I asked one that was a little bit challenging, and I knew it would be, but that's the purpose of this. Yeah. And so I asked it, and she started to answer, and I could tell she got a little bit flustered. And the next thing I know, she's leaning down, and she touches her ankles, and she rubs her hands all the way up the front of her legs, back up into her lap. And I was just incredulous. And then I started, and then she did it again. She leaned down, touched her ankles, and I stopped the filming. And I said, "What was that?" And she said, "What was what? What do you mean? Why are we stopping?" I said, "Well, let's roll it back." So we watched it again. And she said, "I did not do that." Okay. Yes, you did. I mean, you can't really say that, it's right in front of you.
There it is.
And then, so then she realized that she had that habit when she was nervous. And it became more and more conscious. And so as she was out and about, and so anyway, the bottom line is she was able to let it go and not do that anymore. But if we hadn't done the mock interview, she might have done it on some big show.
Yeah.
Which would not have been good.
Not good. No, not good. But
no.
Again, bring it to her attention. Like you say, Joanne McCall, people may not be aware of what they do when they get a little unnerved or nervous or anything, or just
right.
You see, they can see what they're doing and correct it before
everybody sees it.
Yeah, before everybody sees it and thinks, what is she doing? Yeah, because it's distracting.
It is.
Especially on camera. Well, of course, on camera. If I'm rubbing my ankles and up my legs, no one's going to see. No one's going to see. Yet, when you're on camera, that would be really distracting. Because
yes,
and it would be interesting to stop, have a group of people watch and say, what was she just talking about? And
nobody would know.
They wouldn't know. They think, I don't know. I was watching her touch her ankles and rub up her legs to her lap.
Right. When I start working with a new person, a new client, one of the first questions I ask them is, are there any questions you're afraid to be asked? Because those are the ones that would make a person nervous. And we talk about that inner game, kind of what's going on inside. So an example might be, you might have even interviewed this person. She's a relationship expert. And so she's written lots of books on how to have a marriage and a relationship and that kind of thing. But and I was in radio at the time, so I was going to interview her. So I did not train her. But the fact of the matter was she had been married and divorced 8 times. Now, what is the obvious question as a host? My first question was, I mean, with all due respect, you're a relationship expert, but you've been married and divorced 8 times. I'm just kind of curious about that. And to her credit, what she said was, well, first of all, I saw a little flash of anger across her face. I don't think she
Oh,
wanted to be asked that. It was just real quick, but I saw it. And she said, well, you know how a lot of people they'll be in high school and they'll have a boyfriend, and they'll go to college, they'll have a relationship. College, they'll have a relationship. Maybe they'll move in with somebody and then maybe eventually get married. She says, I just married everyone along the way. Which I thought we laughed.
yeah.
And then we were able to move on with the interview. Someone clearly worked with her to answer that question. Right?
I would think that would be a time to maybe say, that's where I've developed my expertise.
That would be good too.
Correct?
Yes.
That's why I'm doing what I'm doing today, because I wanted to know why I don't want to use the word fail, why they didn't work out, why these things that I thought would be great, these marriages would be great, didn't work out.
Right.
And from that, I gained experience. I don't know. You're the expert with this, not me. I'm talking with Joanne McCall, Media Darling. Incredible book. Like I say, even from what I'm doing, I learned so much from it. And I think about some of the interviews and some of the, I think anybody being interviewed could learn so much from your book.
Thanks.
Again, I don't want to be critical of some. You're right. You're correct, Joanne McCall. Some people aren't. They may have written a brilliant book. The writing might be incredible, and then you interview them, and they. I don't know what the word would be. Not struggle. They just don't bring the points out that you had hoped for, or that would be valuable for the
Happens all the time. Happens all the time.
And you do training also. I also remember, Joanne McCall, I hope you don't mind, I keep coming up with these stories, having someone who I had on that I really, really liked. I don't want to say anything to identify it, but I was so excited that he was going to be on much earlier in my radio days. And he was great. And then when we had to take hard breaks, commercial breaks, whatever, in the news, whatever it was, I spoke with him off air. I picked up and spoke with him off air and told him he was a different person.
Yeah.
And it was so, no audience didn't hear that part, obviously.
Just you.
I didn't say anything about it. I was so disappointed.
I've had that happen.
Oh, wow. It was just like, really, you're not who I thought you were.
Yep.
It's an act.
Yep.
Oh,
I know. Disappointing.
It's very disappointing.
Yes.
Again,
And wrong audience, because those are your hosts. I mean, they could likely have you on or not in the future. They could say something,
Yeah. I wouldn't have said anything to my
right.
Yet I certainly wouldn't have him back.
Right.
And I stopped promoting his work.
Exactly.
I didn't feel I couldn't do it. I couldn't do it, finding out that he wasn't who I had perceived him to be. So it would be beneficial for them not to behave that way. So the host will continue to promote their work, have them back, like you said, et cetera. Working with, and people, if they go to joannemccall.com, you train people. Obviously, that's where the expertise comes from. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Sure. Yeah. So one of the first things is I work with a lot of business owners, and many of them have books. I work with a lot of authors who have businesses. And one of the first things I do, sometimes they'll send me their book. They'll send me all kinds of info on them, and we'll have a kind of a get acquainted session. And I do not read all that material beforehand, because when we first meet, I will ask the question we don't necessarily love in other contexts, Louis, but what's your book about? And then I can tell by how they answer that, how much training they might need, whether they need it or not. Maybe they probably do. Most people do. But I can tell a lot just from how they say it and what they say and how long the answer is and that sort of thing. So that's kind of the first step is what's going to be needed here. And then a conversation about that. And then I propose a few ideas, send it to them, and then we talk about it. Often it's just a couple of sessions. We do it virtually. I love to do it in person. Used to do it in person all the time. But of course, the world has changed some.
Changed radically. Well, and the ability to do it virtually. People don't have to travel.
Right.
There's more time, if they're coming to you, there's more time involved. And then you've got, so it's wonderful to be able to do that. And the virtual seminars, things that I've watched or participated in that I certainly wouldn't have been able to travel to and take the time, et cetera, which is great. And by the way, when I'm looking at success stories on your website, and again, that's joannemccall.com, Jane Finkel, author of The Introvert's Complete Guide, Career Guide from Landing a Job, et cetera. I remember doing the gig with her, as I call it, and realizing I read the book, but it didn't hit me in the book. We're talking more. I thought, I'm more of an introvert. Yes, I express, I behave. And maybe when I was younger, it was certainly more of an, and I realized it was like, wow. I mean, I've got these characteristics. And
I am too, by the way.
Yeah. It's
most people would not guess that.
Yeah, I wouldn't guess that. I wouldn't guess that. And most people, I believe, wouldn't guess that about me. But when I think a lot, yeah. And Richard Brian Tracy, I mean, you've got an amazing list of people. Richard Bandler, I will never forget you connecting, sending him my way. And it was like, Richard Bandler. I was aware of neurolinguistic programming years prior to my radio days. I had read one of his books prior to, and it was like Richard Bandler, Dr. Richard Bandler, and I just had a blast with him. And that's wow.
He loved interviewing with you too.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
He's just some of the. Do you get people that you send something, they say, I didn't like that host, or?
Sometimes.
Yeah.
Sometimes. I had one client who used to send me a note, never again. He was all business,
It happened. Again, and yet they have to be prepared. Go ahead.
Well, I kind of rely on it. Now we can watch interviews, so I can see kind of the interaction and what goes on. But not all that long ago, I had to rely on the feedback I got from the guest. What was the host like? I know, I've known for years. And there are others that I know I've known for a long time. But sometimes when someone's new, I don't always know. And so I love the feedback. They were great at questions, but they were, whatever. It's just helpful. And
then, and it helps you to know the host, at least in that scenario.
I might not send someone back depending on the response.
Feedback. Yeah.
If
they were a jerk or
whatever. Yeah.
Yeah. Whatever. Because again, especially back years ago or even recently, it's not like you're face to face with them. It's not like, you're emailing them, or back in the old days, mailing a press release. Whatever.
Oh, wow. Yeah. That's a long time ago.
But that's different than actually hearing them live. It's not like you can, especially before a lot of the technology today, you couldn't listen in to an interviewer, a host, and think, I don't know if I want to send this person that way. Plus, you'd have to spend so much time doing that. And maybe they were having a bad day. I don't know. I'm not making an excuse for it. You learn from the people you send.
You do. Yes, you
clients do. To find out. Book publicity. Talk with us a little bit about that, Joanne?
So I want to clarify one thing with Richard Bandler, Dr. Richard Bandler. I did not train him. I mean, he's amazing on his own. I was setting up interviews for him, so I just want to say that. Yeah, he
didn't need
fantastic.
trained. No, not
okay. Good.
He trains people, not
he does.
He's the trainer.
He's the trainer. Yes, he is. So the process of book publicity is really just getting attention for your book and presenting it in such a way that earned media. So there are different buckets of media now, Louis. You familiar with these? Earned media, that's when someone else is involved. You have to jump through a few hoops to get it. There's your own media. Some call it owned media, and that's your own stuff. That's any videos you do. It's a podcast you do. It's your blog, your website. You are in charge of the narrative. You are in charge of what goes out there. If you do a video that you hate, it never sees the light of day. Earned media, on the other hand, that's going to publish or, whatever, because someone else is involved. And then there's a third category called borrowed or rented media, which is social media. And that's more of an amplification tool, really. So you take your earned media interviews and your media elements that you produce, your content, and then you amplify it through social media channels. So those are the different buckets. There's actually a fourth bucket of advertising if someone wants to do advertising. So there's really four. But when it comes to publicity, there's the three. So an author, business person, whatever, would start with their own media. You have to get that put together. What is your message? What are you about? What is your brand? Get your website, do all of these things, get it set up. And then at that point, you can begin the earned media outreach. So that's really about defining your market, figuring out who in the media would be interested in that and shares that market, and then coming up with the ideas and pitching them to get the person on the show or to get yourself on the show if you're promoting yourself. So that, in a nutshell, is what publicity is about. And then, delivering a great interview, which is that media training part of it. So doing a great job. And then how do you promote it afterwards? So you've got all these interviews. So what do you do with it? So that's a piece of it too. So yeah, in a nutshell. And so the next book is really going to focus on how do you figure out what media you should be going after? Where should you be? What should you be doing? How do you approach them? Used to be, things change, right? It used to be email was the way, but a lot of times it's through social channels now. So
interesting.
But I will tell you this, one of the fundamentals is, and it will always be a fundamental, and that is about relationships. So if it's your relationship with media, you want to contact them in the way that they want to be contacted. And it varies. So you take really good notes. This person loves to talk on Signal. This person this way, and you kind of put all that together. That's really the advantage of having someone help you with it who has those contacts already. Otherwise, you are doing that, which is fine. It is in brain surgery, you can. But when you hire someone else to help you, that's really what you're getting, is someone who's
the expertise.
Done that.
And
know the people.
Trying to find their way on their own can be challenging and time consuming.
Very much so. You can do it, but very much so.
But you help, you can shortcut that for them, because they've got, if they first, like you say, all the other training in media, darling, but those contact to know how and what it, you're going to learn, you're going to miss things, certainly.
Right.
Someone may have written a great book, but they're not a publicist. They don't know how to promote it.
And if you decide to, there's a lot of freebies out there. You can go to webinars and you can go to YouTube and watch various videos, and you can do all of these things, listen to podcasts, and you may get pieces of it, but you first have to discern if that advice is for you or not. And it isn't always clear. So depending on your particular situation, there's one expert in Twitter, for example, who says you have to tweet every single hour, every day of the week. Well, not really. Maybe if you're Southwest Airlines or, some big brand, yes. And they have a whole department to do that, to do all the different channels. But if you're one person, business owner, maybe you have a few employees and, you've written a book, or you're I don't mean just, I love authors. What am I?
I love
authors. If it's you and you're doing this, then tweeting, once an hour for 7 days a week, even if you can write them in advance, is a huge chunk of time. And I don't think it's necessary. So when you go to these freebies, you have to discern, is this for me or not? And they don't always tell you. By the way, this is only for major brands. They don't tell you that. You have to kind of figure it out.
I'm terrible with social media, and I was better a while back. I'm just, seriously, and yet I see the value of it. I remember when someone said on Instagram, why don't you hashtag?
Mm.
And I thought, okay, I mean, we'll do that. Yet I still don't do it often enough, and it's important.
Well, you should at least do your name or your show name.
Oh, I never even thought of that.
Yes. Yes. Because then if anyone wants to look you up, those things will come up. That's really why.
See, look at what I'm learning from Joanne McCall.
Well, we're all learning every day, thankfully.
Well, yes, we are. We should be.
Should be.
Are and some.
That's true. That's true.
Some
people get a little stuck.
So go down that same road where they blew a tire in a pothole that hasn't been fixed yet, and they'll still go down that road.
Keep falling in.
That's the way
I know that one.
that one. Joanne, I'm grateful for the time. I would love to do a part 2 about this. I've kept you a long time, and I'm grateful. I want to say again, I'm so grateful to and for you and the relationship we've developed over the years, and the amazing guests. I mean, get emotional. The amazing guests that you've sent, and how wonderful you've been working with me, and patient, and everything. And I've learned so much from you. And
Louis, I love you.
I love you too.
Yeah.
Thanks,
we're friends.
And we become friends. I mean, I love that. And we've talked about Petey the squirrel earlier, and fond memories of your squirrel, Petey.
Yeah.
You're wonderful and amazing. Again, just a minute or two about your website, JoanneMcCall.com.
Yeah, that's where a lot of this information is. I've got a fun little video on there that actually a client did when he did a tour. He did a bike tour from the Pacific coast to the Atlantic. 3 people, they had a big van. Anyway, they interviewed entrepreneurs, and they included me. So I have that up there, which is kind of fun. Just tells a story. It's kind of fun. And if anybody has a book or business to promote, you can get in touch with me. We can talk about it and see if I can help out. And Louis, what a pleasure. I've wanted to do this for 20 years, and here we are. So
here we are. And I hope we can do it again.
Nice.
all the things that you can provide people. You should certainly get the book and read the book. And then contact Joanne McCall.
Yeah.
Joanne, thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Louis.
Wonderful. It was wonderful. Can you stay with me for one more minute?
Of course.
I'll be back with more on the Louis B. Free radio show. Actually, I'm going to have to sign off soon. Okay. Bear with me, folks, just for a minute, and you can listen to this.